From Quito, Ecuador, my name is Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South, the daily news brief on Telesur English. And we begin this new edition right now. There were plenty of warnings before President Donald Trump announced his recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and now they seem to be becoming a reality. At least 17 Palestinians have been wounded by Israeli troops in the occupied West Bank, as the leader of Hamas called on his people to ignite another intifada. One protester was hit by live fire, others by rubber bullets, as Israel has deployed hundreds of extra troops in the West Bank. Our correspondent in Gaza, Noor Harasin, has this report on the 3 days of rage taking place in Palestine.
It is a day of anger and rage for the Palestinian people after the U.S. President Donald Trump decided yesterday to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Until the last minute before this statement, Palestinians were in shock. They did not even believe that this will happen. Since yesterday, and the Palestinian factions and political parties have been asking the people of Gaza, the West Bank, and the Palestinian people in diaspora to hit the streets and protests and rallies against this decision. Also here in the Gaza Strip, the many ministries declared it as a day, 3 days of war. For example, the Ministry of Education have halted all the studies in the schools and also the universities of Gaza Strip for 3 days from now.
Noor Harasin from Gaza. Campaigning is ending for Venezuela's municipal elections on Sunday. This Thursday, the National Electoral Council welcomed a diverse group of over 50 international guests who will accompany the vote. Our correspondent Freddie Gillingham was there and sent us this report.
So we're here at the CNE in downtown Caracas, where we have attended the official accreditation ceremony for international accompaniers and members of the Electoral Council of Experts of Latin America. We've been speaking to international accompaniers from all over the world, to name a few countries: Slovenia, Spain, Ireland and England. From the Council of Electoral Experts, this is basically made up of specialists who are former magistrates and ex-presidents of electoral councils from the region. They have been validating elections in Venezuela for the last 18 years and with very positive results. Both sets are going to be deployed tomorrow. We will keep you updated until Election Day on December 10th.
Now we go back to the Palestine situation, to our correspondent Jorge Estoso in Washington, D.C. for the situation over there. Hello, Jorge. So there's been outrage in Palestine and across much of the world. What has been the reaction there in Washington?
Well, Carla, one of the reactions that is very, very strong has been the one of the former CIA's director, talking about John Brennan, who has said, and I quote, "Trump's action was reckless and would damage U.S. interests in the Middle East for years to come and will make the region more volatile." And another thing that happened is that we've known that one of his largest donors, we're talking about Sheldon Alderson, who put $35 million in Trump's campaign, was one of the persons who really pressured Trump to take that decision. Also, Vice President Mike Pence, who is an evangelist, and he was under pressure of the evangelist community, that is a right-wing community very much pro-Israeli, and also the lobby of pro-Israeli hardliners. Mostly those are the people who push him to take that decision, and but very, very, if you want, questionable. The opposition of the Democratic Party has been silenced here in Washington, and there are a lot of question marks what's going on, if they agree or not agree, but definitely the silence is very much suspicious.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for your report. That was Jorge Gestoso, our correspondent in Washington. The opposition alliance in Honduras is calling for an international court to review all the ballots from the country's disputed elections. More details in the next report.
Members of the Liberal Party, which is the third Honduran political force, say they have 82% of the records reviewed, where the winner is Salvador Nasralla. They claim the electoral court is a complete fraud.
In our count, in 82% of the records, Salvador Nasralla wins. But don't take this from the Liberal Party, nor attack me with claims of credibility. It's not our job to say who won. This is the job of the electoral court.
Even when there's a result in the presidential ballots, the delay in the fold-downs of the system have raised questions about a potential fraud over 30%.
There was always a systemic fraud, a systematic fraud, a fraud of estimately 34% by the National Party on the presidential level. I haven't done the calculations for the municipalities, but it's impossible that with that level of voting, they got 2/3 of the power.
Among the solutions to the crisis, the search for agreements between these forces to generate a better climate for the country have been hard.
There's already a problem of a total lack of institutionality from the electoral authority, who's creating a crisis that requires a political pact. If that pact implies the need to look for other democratic solutions for the crisis, the Liberal Party will approve it.
The current government's parties say they will accept the review of the records, but without counting and supervising the total of votes, as requested by the opposition alliance.
Trade unions, as well as social and political organizations, are protesting outside the Honduras consulate in Montevideo to reject the electoral fraud carried out by the nation's Supreme Electoral Tribunal. Demonstrators demanded the resignation of current president and candidate Juan Orlando Hernández and asked the Electoral Tribunal to respect the choice of the people. They requested the Honduran state to stop the repression against those who reject the electoral results and the immediate restoration of the institutional system in the country.
It's clear that this is a dictatorship despite the elections that were held in Honduras. Also, many elections have been fraudulent. Not only this last one. In 2014, there were more votes than people registered, a series of inconvenient events that took the country to this situation.
We know that this is a fight that needs to bring us closer, that helps us to get organized, just like the first fight for independence, as none of our people freed themselves alone.
And now to Chile, where a group of human rights defenders also supported the Honduran people by rejecting the alleged fraud and the repression that took place after the presidential elections on November 26. Demonstrators stood outside the Foreign Relations Ministry where they delivered a letter to its chancellor, Hernando Muñoz. The document asked Chile to reject the electoral fraud and not to acknowledge the results.
We are demanding that the government and the Ministry of Foreign Relations show their concern about what is happening in Honduras and that they defend their right to reject the electoral fraud taking place in the country. We are here to denounce and demand, as victims of a dictatorship, that we don't want another country to go through what we went through for 17 years.
We as students are rejecting this violation, and we express our solidarity to the people of Honduras. We support every democratic action and norm, especially in a presidential election process.
Our correspondent Heather Geese joins us now from Tegucigalpa. Heather, the opposition candidate Salvador Nasralla was due to speak to media. What can you tell us about this?
So we're expecting Salvador Nasralla to give a press conference any time now. This press conference has been described as an important message for the Honduran people and a message that will lay out the next steps in this process as the opposition continues to accuse the Supreme Electoral Tribunal of trying to rig the election in favor of President Juan Orlando Hernández, who's seeking re-election. So we're not sure exactly what Nasralla is expected to say, but I think we can expect that he will describe the course of action that the opposition is going to take from here on, because there's really been an impasse with the Supreme Electoral Tribunal. Now, under pressure from the Organization of American States, which has said in its preliminary report that it can't have certainty in the results that have come out of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal. The tribunal has said that it will answer some of the demands of the opposition alliance, including a review of the vote tally. However, at this point, the opposition alliance has said that the problem fundamentally is with the vote tallies because they believe they have been tampered with, and not just the more than 5,000 that were not transmitted electronically from the voting stations, but more broadly in all of the ballot boxes. So what the opposition is calling for is for the ballot boxes to actually be opened up and to do a full recount of this election. Now, that is not something that the tribunal has agreed to. At this point, it has not been officially ruled out either, but I think that we'll be able to expect to hear more from the opposition alliance today in this press conference about how it plans to push these demands forward, and also what kinds of mobilizations might be called in the coming days to increase the kind of citizen pressure on this process. This morning, the National Party convened a march in Tegucigalpa. They were marching in the streets this morning. It's now pouring rain, so we're not sure if they're still in the streets, but I think that we can expect the opposition alliance to also call some kind of new mobilization, because its supporters have been in the streets even without an official call for mobilization. So we're expecting that relative speaking time, and those are some of the things that I think we'll be hearing.
Thank you very much, Heather. That was Heather Gies from Tegucigalpa. We'll be coming back with more news in a minute. Stay with us. Cuban President Raúl Castro has arrived in Antigua Barbuda ahead of the 4th CARICOM-Cuba summit set to begin on Friday. Castro was received by his counterpart Prime Minister Gaston Brown at V.C. Byrd International Airport and then escorted to the Carlisle Bay Resort, where Friday's international meeting will be held. The CARICOM-Cuba summit will discuss a number of topics of both regional and global importance, particularly climate change and disaster risk management. The group will also explore other options for business and development to promote relations and integration between the member states. The Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago has said that the most important achievement of his 2 years in office was signing an agreement with Venezuela on the joint exploitation of gas. The agreement signed in March this year includes building a pipeline from the giant Dragon gas field in the east of Venezuela, and it would allow Trinidad and Tobago to supply its own market and to process and re-export up to 300 million cubic feet of gas by 2020.
So far, my biggest success, I would say, has been the quieting of the successes we've had in the energy sector, ensuring that we got a gas price agreement to re-energize the operations of the investors in the energy sector. Also, getting the Venezuelans to agree to give Trinidad and Tobago access to Venezuelan gas fields. This gives us a future which we couldn't contemplate even 2 years ago. This is a major development that allows us to remain in the gas business for decades once we manage to get it completed.
Staying in Trinidad and Tobago, sexual harassment and victimization debates have started in response to the local and international discussion on the issue of sexual harassment at the workplace. The Institute for Gender and Development Studies hosted a discussion called Boardroom Bullying on Tuesday. The speakers insisted that although the country has laws to deal with sexual harassment in the workplace, if it is not supported by the organizations themselves, attempts to safeguard the victims will be in vain. Local attorney Lynette Sibaran Soot says the country should take a look at the legislation.
The things we have to do is look at legislation, and the other thing that we have to do is to let the scales drop from our eyes and understand exactly what it is we are dealing with. If we understand what we are dealing with, we can then know exactly what are the mechanisms to be put in place.
A federal judge in Argentina has requested the preventive arrest of former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner for allegedly covering up Iran's possible role in a 1994 bombing at a Buenos Aires Jewish center. The former president was recently elected as a senator, and in order to be detained, Congress will have to vote to take her parliamentary immunity away. Fernández de Kirchner has blamed the government for carrying out a political persecution against the opposition. The Argentine Navy has denied that the missing submarine made emergency calls before disappearing 3 weeks ago with 44 crew members. Navy spokesman Enrique Balbi said that instead of emergency calls, the submarine communication system was trying to access an internet connection, but the attempts failed. On the other hand, President Mauricio Macri has asked for patience while officials try to find out what really happened.
We'll keep going with the search mission in order to understand why and how this happened. We're putting a lot of time on it, so I'm asking all of you to be patient and to not get anxious so we can give priority to the search efforts.
The judicial and political debate continues in Colombia after the disapproval of the special peace jurisdictions. Victims, social and indigenous organizations, and even the government have been presenting options for this space in Congress to become a reality.
The leaders of the indigenous communities deeply regret the failure of the Colombian Congress to approve the 16 seats reserved for the victims of the conflict, as stated in the Havana Peace Agreement. They believe that the failure of the political framework, which outlines their inclusion in the process, is just another attack on those who have suffered most in the armed conflict.
We're deeply sorry that those 16 seats given to the victims are still under judicial discussion. They deserve them because they've suffered the horrors of the war. So we're asking all organizations, victims, and people to take this very seriously.
The debate and mobilization around this open rejection continues, which some groups describe as vindictive. And as evidence, the traditional politicians fear losing the power and privileges that they currently enjoy.
It's not that they are victims of the paramilitaries or the guerrillas. They're victims of the country, of the Congress. And people have to know that these people back here, not all of them, but a significant majority, have spat in the face of the victims.
For the victims, the government never really included them as a part of this process as it had promised, nor is the Colombian Congress the parliament of peace.
It's disrespectful that they've rejected these reserved seats, which were part of the agreements. The senators had the audacity of leaving us out, the people, the ones who have suffered the conflict firsthand, denying us the possibility to be at the center of the agreement.
The implementation of the Havana Agreements will develop amid the upcoming electoral debate of 2018. It is this scenario that will see right groups use the opportunity to stand up for what was actually signed in the final agreement in the Colón Theater in Bogotá.
The Lula for Brazil caravan is still making its way around the country. Our correspondent Ignacio Lemus has been following this story and files this report.
We're still following very close this third period of the caravan, Lula for Brazil, which is coming to the state of Espírito Santo and then right here to the state of Rio de Janeiro. Yesterday, Lula arrived to the metropolitan region of Rio de Janeiro. We are pretty close to the city in the metropolitan region. Today's schedule has been committed to talk about unemployment here in Brazil, which is a problem that affects more than 13 million workers who are now unemployed. Lula has recalled that this is due to Michel Temer's missteps and his political group. For instance, the establishment of a new labor reform, public expenses as well as public investments were frozen. So all of these affected workers directly, who also suffer of a lack of public services and policies that could help them. The caravans scheduled for today include also a visit to the Baixada Puminisca, which is an impoverished region here in the state of Rio de Janeiro. Right now, Rio de Janeiro is experiencing one of its worst financial and political crises. 3 ex-governors were arrested for corruption, and the actual governor of Rio de Janeiro, which is Michel Temer's ally, is being indicted and he could lose his position as governor. So Lula is exposing all of these group members of the right-wing movement and is bringing a message of hope to the people of this country, which is struggling with Michel Temer's policies. Meanwhile, we are still reporting from the highway following Lula's caravan around Brazil.
That was in fact André Vieira from Brazil. In Brasilia, members of the small farmers movement have held a hunger strike in protest against the pension reform that President Michel Temer wants to approve. We have more in this report.
These 3 members of the small farmers movement have been on strike for over 24 hours. This is how they are showing their strong disapproval to the reform of the pension system that Michel Temer's government is trying to approve.
A hunger strike is only done in extreme circumstances, and these pension reforms are an extreme. It is going to leave out 60% of the rural workers. That means 60% of Brazilian farmers will not be able to retire. And those are the poorest and most fragile.
The government says that written in the new reform, rural workers would not be affected, but campesinos have explained that this is not true and it is merely a lie to win votes.
The government says that farmers don't contribute to Social Security, but we do contribute. Our contribution comes from a tax that takes 0.2% of everything that is sold from the farmer's production and family agriculture.
The farmer contributes directly with his rural activity, with his production, which turns into money when it goes to the Social Security. But that is during the Safra, which takes 4 or 5 months, not 180 like they want. They say that they removed the text that talks about farmers, but the truth is that there is a loophole that puts the rural workers back in the reform.
The pension system in Brazil has failed and it has no resources to sustain, according to Temer and his economic team.
The government stopped collecting money from the tax exemption that was given to the foreign oil companies. It stopped collecting around 1 trillion. Is it reasonable to allow something like this? Private banks and other companies that haven't renegotiated their debts owe over 500 billion reales to the Social Security. That is not a game. So why are they putting their hands in the poor's pockets?
308 votes are needed in the Chamber of Deputies to approve the reform of the pension system. Rodrigo Maia, the president of that legislative institution and ally of Temer, will only put it into vote when he has the certainty that it will pass.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Thousand people have protested in favor of Catalan independence in Brussels, where deposed leader Carles Puigdemont is currently living. Thousands of people traveled to the Belgian capital by caravan and car, causing major traffic disruption throughout the city. Demonstrators say they want to open a dialogue around finding solutions to what they see as not only a Spanish problem, but an issue for all of Europe.
The message is for the European institutions, as well as for the people of Europe and for everybody, because it's not only a matter of Spanish politics. We believe that it's a European political matter, but also a global matter. The Catalan question is a question of democracy. We want to vote, we want to self-determine our right to freedom as a population, and also it's a scream against the repression of the Spanish state versus politicians and the Catalan people.
Every citizen has the right to organize themselves to express an ambition, a political hope for change. What we say at the Commission on the basis of the rule of law is, if you don't agree with the law, you have the right to contest the law. If you don't agree with the law, you have the right to organize yourself to change the law or the Constitution. What is not permissible in the rule of law is to just ignore the law.
Thousands of people marched through the European Quarter in Brussels in support of Catalan independence. Our correspondent John Ortiz files this report.
The march has ended, but many people are still on the streets of the Belgium capital. This has been a very powerful protest and political act that we have been following, where several officials from Carles Puigdemont and Marta Rovira to representatives of other parliaments have supported the democratic process in Catalonia. Strong criticism towards Europe has called attention because it is not looking towards Spain, where they have deployed Article 155 with all the consequences that this implies, and there are people who are still in prison. We are in an electoral campaign for elections on December 21st. The parties will not be presented in coalitions, but each one will go separately. Today we have seen representatives of the CUP, Esquerra Republicana, and Junts per Catalonia. It's the first time that the three parties are together. From now we wait to see what is happening with the European Union, if it will react or not. But today the 45,000 protesters are appealing to the heart of the European institutions.
Our correspondent John Ortiz. Now hundreds of people have marched on Capitol Hill in Washington to defend the rights of immigrant families and stand against the cancellation of temporary protective status. The TPS status protects more than 300,000 people from 9 countries living in the United States. In January 2019, Trump intends to end the special status given to 5,300 Nicaraguan immigrants that protects them from deportation. One protester from Nicaragua, currently protected by the TPS, had this to say.
This is a country we're told it's about opportunities. It's a country, it's said, that's about diversity of cultures. And that's what the President Donald Trump and Congress ought to respect. The diversity, because altogether we form a rainbow, which is what makes this country beautiful.
And we end today with some breaking news from Argentina. The jailed indigenous leader Milagro Sala has just been absolved in one of the cases against her. We'll bring you more as we get it. We've come to the end of this daily news brief. This and many other news, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.